Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you today?
Well, pretty well. Now, it's about a little after 2 o'clock in the morning over there?
Yeah, just after 2 a.m. So I'm still kind of waking up a little bit here. I've only been awake for about 15 minutes. That's okay. That's good. Yeah.
I was telling Jason, as we were getting ready to begin the broadcast, he was telling me about his kitten. Likes to pull the curtain down. And, that's what they do. They like to climb. When they're young, they have a lot of energy. They have too much energy. So I told them what we do here at the farmhouse. And it's one of these things in the little book that I'm writing. And we have a 1-quart squirt bottle, and it's used for spraying. You know, like if you want to clean your windows, you can put some vinegar and water in there, or you can put some liquid detergent in there to clean things and spray them. And we use them in the automotive shop, and we spray a high concentration of water mixed with dishwashing detergent that we spray on the bead of tires to see if there's a leak between the bead and the rubber part of the tire, the bead of the tire, or if there are nail punctures and it bubbles up and it tells us where the nail holes are or the leaks are. Well, we have another one that we marked tap water, so we mark them on the top with a marker what they're used for, so they don't get used for different purposes. And we keep tap water in one of them, and we adjust that little nozzle so that from 10 feet away, we can train the cat not to climb up the screens, not to pull down the curtains, not to climb on furniture.
I've heard about
and it works great because
it
works great because cats don't like
water pistols. I don't know if people even have water pistols anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they're legal. Speaking of legal,
someone might get hurt. Someone might get water in their eye.
Yeah. Right. So you shouldn't. Yeah. Have you heard? Before we get into the macabre of today's discussion about dead bodies, have you heard of this? Well, there was a garlic festival in Gilroy, Gilroy, California. And I've been there, but it was, back in the 80s. Mrs. Finelli and I served our time for about 18 months in California before we escaped. And so we went to the Gilroy Garlic Festival. And it is have you heard of this festival? And have you heard of the shooting that went on recently?
I think I have.
No? Yes?
I think I have.
All right. Well, here's what happened.
Crazy at this garlic festival with a firearm or something. Yeah, I think I did.
That's right. Yeah. So during this garlic festival, this male, cut through the chain link fence and started shooting. And several people were wounded. Actually, 5 were wounded at the garlic festival. 5 people were wounded. And so now there's a suit against the people who put on the garlic festival. And let me kind of explain this garlic festival. It's an open air outdoor thing. It's in a field. And you drive your car and you find a spot to park on the grass. At least that's what we did. And you walk from your car or your truck over to where there are tents and there are tables and there are, small startup businesses selling their garlic-related products. And, there's discussions, and they might even have some music playing, live music. And that's the Garlic Festival. Well, the people were shot by this guy who cut through a chain link fence. Now, the fence did not encircle the entire festival. And the people who were shot said, like one of them said, quote, "I was under the impression that all things were safe and under control," end quote, at the festival. What does that mean? So, in this shooting, let's see, there were 3 people that were ultimately killed, and 14 were injured. And how many shots were fired? I'll have to find how many shots were fired, but, in the 20s. So the point of this is you have this outdoor event, you invite the general public, and then it seems that you're responsible for thinking of everything. Well, should they have put a fence around the entire festival? Should they have armed guards at each corner of the fence? Should they have walking armed guards, inside the perimeter of the fence? Should they have had an ambulance or ambulances ready and a medical team ready and a helicopter at the ready at the Garlic Festival in case this happened? We're now at the point where guys like I have thrown in the towel. I will not have an expo, and I've said I won't have an expo. Because I don't want to be sued because some jerk walks in the front door and we don't have enough police. Or we don't have police in the parking lot. Or we don't have police at the entrance to the parking lot. Or the exit of the parking lot. Or we don't have surveillance over the fence or on the roof. Now, if you think about it, this is absolutely beyond nuts. And as a matter of fact, what happens when you have an event like we've had, the expo, the Get Prepared Expo, we thought that, it'd be good to have the police the first couple of times. And the police, if you want to hire an off-duty cop, and that's what happens. If you go to a gun show, there are off-duty cops that are hired there. So how do you hire one? You can't just go up to Charlie and say, "Charlie, listen, you're a good neighbor. Well, can I hire you for the weekend?" You can't do that. You have to go to the city police, and they've got a guy in charge of the crew that's off-duty, and you hire through the police department. And it's price fixed. It's $25 an hour for an off-duty guy. And you can't say, "I don't want that fat one over there," or "I don't want that skinny one over there," or "I don't want that." You can't say that. You can't say, "Tom's my friend, I want him." No. They tell you who you're going to have. And it's price fixed. So that's how that works. So I'm not interested in any of this. I'm not interested in renting a venue that is owned by the city or the county, and that if I want to have police, I have to get it from them. I mean, it's price fixed, it's rigged, and I won't be any part of it. And I don't want to be sued because some jerk decides to go nuts. Or maybe it's a false flag, or maybe it's designed to take us down. So I'm not interested in any of that. So I can see fewer and fewer and fewer events happening that are started and run by just individuals like me and others like me. In favor of, I think what will happen is the government will have these little festivals, and they'll have their police there. And if anything happens, well, you can't sue the government. Heck, they were there. They were there protecting and making sure everybody was safe. Kind of like at the schools, where there are shootings at schools. And how do you sue the school system? No, you can't. So you sue the guys who make the guns, and you put them out of business. And let me give an example of what I'm talking about. How many of you have those gas cans for your lawnmower, or your chainsaw, or your weed whacker, or your pressure washer, or your leaf blower? Well, I'm sure you do, because gas cans are red. Even from the 1960s, they were still red. Well, after the 1960s, they were made out of plastic. And there were a couple of companies that built some really good ones. And you could buy them at the Chinese factory outlet for $3.79 for a 5-gallon gas container made out of plastic. And if you looked at the side of it, it probably said the name Biltz, B-I-L-T-Z. Well, we had a bunch of them here at the farm, and they've lasted all these years, and they're just great, and they work great, and they're not like the new ones. The new ones, you can't get the gas. You can get the gas in, but you can't get the gas out because they have these safety feature spouts that will not let the gas out. It's awful. As a matter of fact, the old ones used to have a cap on the end of the spout. So you could put the cap on it, and the gas would be less likely to volatilize, and the dust would be less likely to get in there, and you'd be pouring less dust and dirt and debris in your gas tank from the gas can because it would be sealed. It was great. Well, what happened was there were a bunch of bozos, I guess you'd call them the GDP, and they used these gas cans to help a fire get started even better. So they pour gas on a fire. They start a fire, and then it'd be smoldering. That's not good enough. So they pour gas on it. And then there'd be a ball of fire, and they'd get burned. So naturally, it's the gas can manufacturer's fault, right? Obviously. That's what's wrong with this country. These guys are not smart enough to know that gas is volatile. It can explode with the right conditions. It'll create a really hot fire, and you can get burned by doing stupid things. But no. They do it anyway. And then they sue the gas can manufacturers. Well, the Biltz company, I wanted to buy new spouts for ours because after, 3 decades, they started to wear out and crack. So I didn't need cans. I didn't need the red cans, just those little flexible spouts. So I went on the internet. They're out of business. They had about 65% of the market. They're out of business because they were surrounded 360 degrees by people suing them because they set themselves on fire using those gas cans. That's where we're headed. So it's the GDP with the gas cans to take down the gas can companies. And now a gas can is not $3.79. It's like $30 or $40 for 5 gallons. It used to be $3.79. And they used to work. Now they don't work, and they're 10 times the price. 8 times the price, 5 times the price, depending on which ones you buy. So as we go down this road and people sue the promoters of events, because, heck, they should have known that somebody could have climbed the fence, cut the fence. There was an opening in the fence that was about 300 feet long. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a pretty large area. But the promoters are being sued. So do you think they're going to want to have another garlic festival? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Yeah. So is this kind of nonsense happening in your neck of the woods in Australia, Guineith Isaacs?
Absolutely. We've got a municipality down the road, and that's called the Loddon Shire Council, okay? And I have friends who event promoters. That's what they do for a living, and they had the misfortune of moving into the Loddon Shire, and they have not, well, that's not totally true. They did have one event at their place. Okay. The sort of event that these people have is they have psychedelic dance festivals. So it tends to be very, very loud music, and it tends to be a lot of young people coming in, hanging around, listening to music all weekend.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Guineith, you were talking about an event, a psychedelic dance festival. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah, we've got this young couple live next door, and what they do apparently for a living is they have psychedelic dance festivals. And they had one event on their 20 acres of land next, wherever they live. And, it was in this local area. And they were very good. They told everybody what was happening. They told everybody there was going to be lots of people there, but it was for a weekend and it was for his birthday, okay? And I said, yeah, that's fine. Go and, have your weekend-long birthday party and have your, 50 friends over and all that sort of thing. And there's not many people live around here, and there's another family lives up the way, and there's another family lives across the way, and blah, blah. You know how it goes in a country area. But, you know something, there's that one family in the whole area that got it into their head at 1 a.m. to call the cops. And, I mean, the music was loud. There were a lot of people there. But these people are event organisers. That's what they do for a living. They did everything properly. The only thing they didn't do was notify the police and notify the municipality. So the cops show up at 1 a.m., and aside from the fact that the event was extremely loud, because it was basically a music festival on their land for the weekend, of the sort of music that the young people like to listen to, it was very well run. They had porta potties, they had plenty of hydration, they had food, they had all the catering and all of that, because the young lady in the relationship, that's what she does for a living, and so does he. So when that came time to organise their birthday party, which was a private birthday, and they had, they didn't have any gate crashes except for the blue team. How's that? That's what the municipality here is like. That is absolutely what the municipality here is like. There was another local event here that got shut down by the municipality. It was a kids' go-kart race. Okay? Could you believe that? They shut down a little kids' annual go-kart festival. I think it was actually mini dirt bike festival. A particular farmer had hosted this mini dirt bike festival on his land for the last 20 years, and it was just something that he did because, when his kids were little, they had dirt bikes, and so, they'd get his friends together, and it grew, and it became a bit of a local event. And the municipality came in and shut it down simply because they wouldn't pay the thousands of dollars that was required for the permit. And this is what the Loddon Shire does, and it's almost impossible to have any sort of event in this shire now, unless it's one that has got the big fat rubber stamp and big thumbprint of the Loddon Shire on it. They're disgusting, Vincent, because everything that they touch turns to a big fat stinking pile of coprolol.
When you said a psychedelic dance festival, what does that mean? Does that mean drugs? What does that mean?
Well, I don't know. I'm assuming the best of this young couple because they seem like a lovely couple. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. But, it's their land, and what I saw bright flashing lights, very loud music, and lots of people in a really, really happy mood. That's what I saw. And I have a policy. I keep my nose out of other people's business. I don't know what they do on their land, and that's fine with me because guess what? It's not my land. And they have always been very good neighbours, and there's never been any trouble, and it's the self-righteous goody two-shoes up the back who has been more trouble than any neighbour I see. Well, that's possibly except for the pedophiles in Geraldton, I'd say that they were more trouble. But the neighbours up the back, right. There's just been trouble from one end of it to the other.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. I was getting a cup of coffee, and I was leaving the studio for just a few seconds, and I could have sworn I heard a commercial saying, in America, we have the right to succeed. Guineith, did you hear that? Did I miss?
Did actually, yeah.
I was wondering if I
actually. Oh, carry on.
Okay, we have a delay. I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly. In America, we have a right to succeed. No, we don't. I mean, if I heard that right, We don't have a right to succeed. We have a right to try to succeed. And heck, if you live in any major city, you're going to need a permit for a right to try to succeed, stamped by them. But I don't see.
Some of it.
I don't have a right to succeed. I have a right to try to succeed, assuming I don't do something that they say is not lawful.
Yep.
Wow. You know, we're starting to twist words. Well, not us, but them. They're starting to twist words, and you know, people hear this enough time, they're going to say, well, I have a right to be successful. Well, not if you're a moron, you don't. It's going to be hard to be successful if you don't have an IQ above 70. It's going to be really hard, because it's going to be hard to be successful when you wet your pants. I mean, you have to have an IQ over 70 to not wet your pants. I mean, if you go to apply for a job and the front of your trousers is soaking wet, that interview is not going to last so long. I don't mean to be too graphic, but gee whiz. I'm hearing things that I just can't believe.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, Vincent. Should we get on to the topic for the day? It's,
boy.
We have to sort of warn people that today's show the whole show is going to be graphic, basically, because we're going to talk about some very macabre topics. And it's something that is going on in this universe that everybody has to really, really be aware of. And, you know, that's especially happening in the medical community. And it's like this. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And I should say, okay, before we go any further, I've actually plugged today's broadcast. I don't normally plug the broadcast in Facebook groups, but I did plug this broadcast in a particular Facebook group called the Pirate Nation. And I said that if anyone from the Pirate Nation wants to call in, then they're quite welcome to. So if you get a pirate calling in, then you can tell Jason to tell them, you're welcome, me hearties. Because we are going to, the reason why I did that was because there was some people who are regularly on the group said, why don't you tell us the next time that you go on air that you're going to discuss George Wilson. And rather a lot of this broadcast does have to do with George Wilson as well, because when I was alive hundreds of years ago, and I was a surgeon, and my name was George Wilson, and I, from what I've been able to find out about this past life and verify, I lived in a city in England called Liverpool, and I lived fairly close to the Mersey River, which is a river that runs through Liverpool, and it's a port. And I lived there with my father as a little girl, except my father used to dress me as a boy to send me out to play because simply my chances of coming back alive were going to be higher if I was dressed as a boy than as a girl. But what else my father used to do, because he was a surgeon and he didn't have a son. My mother died in childbirth, and so I was his only child. So because he was a surgeon, he trained me to be a surgeon, starting from about the age of 10. And how he did it was in a rather unique, actually it's not a unique fashion. It's how every surgeon on earth gets trained. But when I saw this, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm rather astounded by what I'm seeing here. But I realized, because I've been interested in anatomy for a very long time, it was just an earlier version of what I knew goes on to this day. He had you were saying the other day, I think it was yesterday with Dr. Shealy, Monday, sorry, with Dr. Shealy, about, bodies, what happens to people who die, homeless people and all of that who die. They get transported to the morgue, and often they get stored in the morgue for maybe a year or two, maybe 6 months, depending on your area. And then after that, they generally get preserved in formaldehyde and sent to your local neighbourhood medical school for the medical students to practice on. That's what happens, okay? I have to tell everybody that. Now, when I was George Wilson, all that time ago, I actually had a dream one night where I was standing on the street in Liverpool, and I just knew that it was Liverpool. Don't ask me how I knew, but I was looking at the house that I used to live in, and it was a very distinctive shape of house. It was a wedge-shaped house, and I walked up into this shop, which was the front door of the house, and it was right on a corner. So it was a wedge-shaped building with the door on the tip of the wedge, okay? Walked into the house, and I saw my childhood home that I grew up in as George Wilson. And on the left-hand side, there was a wall which was covered in shelving. And on the right-hand side, that was on the right-hand side was a wall which was covered in shelving. And on the left-hand side, there were also shelves and counters as well, but there was a glass window behind it. Okay? And on the left, there was the apothecary, that was the pharmacy, the drugstore. And on the right, the shelves that were on the right were filled with large glass jars. And inside the large glass jars was alcohol and human body parts. Arms, legs, internal organs. There was maybe a head or two. Human body parts. And the purpose of that, and that was all totally normal, the purpose of that, it wasn't that my dad was, Sweeney Todd or anything like that. He had a deal with the executioner. When somebody would hang, get executed for their crimes, unless there was somebody there immediately at the execution to pick up the body of whoever it was that had just been murdered by the state, then my father would come along and he bribed the executioner. And the executioner would allow him to take the body away of being an unclaimed body. And he would take it away and he would take it into the basement of this building and he would turn it into biological specimens. And that was what went on. And these jars of body parts, the human body parts that he had lined up in his shot, completely public. That was his mark of being a surgeon. Because what he would do, this all happened about 300 years ago, by the way. The building's no longer there. I've checked. But what he would do, when he needed to practice a new technique, he would get the appropriate body part out of the jar of alcohol. He'd put it on his surgical table and he would practice the new technique, or he would study the layout of the anatomy. And he would get his textbook and all of that sort of thing. And that's what he would do to improve his surgical knowledge. And guess what, Vincent? That's how every surgeon on earth is trained. They're all trained like that, even to this day. They are not allowed to perform an operation on a living person until they have done that operation on at least 100 cadavers. Did you know that?
No, but if you watch the Nick, it's a video series called The K-N-I-C-K, as in Knickerbocker. You will see the hospital of the 1900 era, 1900, 119 years ago. And you will see that in this series, the police, the cop, the constable on patrol, would be the guy who would round up the dead and bring them in a paddy wagon, or however he could get them there, to the hospital for a fee of $25. So corpses were really valuable. And the cops were looking for corpses because $25 was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was find them. Some drunkard, in the Bowery who just died from his own neglect or freezing to death or whatever it might have been. Chemical poisoning, whatever. Those were the cadavers that would end up in the hospital for experimentation. Mm-hmm. They used to use pigs, but pigs were okay, but not as good as people.
Well,
yes.
The thing is, pig anatomy is very similar, very, very similar to human anatomy, but it's not the same. And it's not just the external things. It's that pigs have lobed livers. They actually have. If you look at a pig's liver, it has a bunch of different sections in its liver, whereas humans have an unlobed liver. If you look at our liver, it's basically a large, smooth organ. I think it might be in two pieces from memory, because you have to have a piece, you've got to have somewhere to put the gallbladder, and the gallbladder is right up inside the liver. It's not anywhere close to the surface. And that's,
we'll be right back. We're going to talk. We're going to be talking. We'll be talking more about this. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Deborah in Kentucky, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Good morning, Vincent. I have two quick comments. Number one is we have to figure out what to do since we've lost GCN listen lines. I haven't been able to get on to listen to your program for 2 or 3 weeks now. And I was wondering if there's a possibility of you having a spot on RBN. You used to, and I can't find you there anymore. And secondarily...
Yeah, I'm on RBN. Deborah, USA Prepares is on RBN, Republic Broadcasting Network, but delayed. So it is this broadcast right here, right now, will be played on RBN tomorrow at the hours of 6 a.m. through 8 a.m. 6 a.m.
Okay, is there anything that we can do about a live broadcast so that, listening and being part of the program, then I can make a contribution that has any value. And secondarily,
okay,
I will
talk to our engineer about that. I'm not in control of the telephone listen line, but I will talk to Jason about that. And if I need to go higher up the ladder at Genesis Communications Network, I'll do that.
Vincent, I think they're gone. Whatever it relates to, it has to do with the company that used to provide those numbers. But anyway, secondarily, I wanted to make a suggestion about hemp oil for Guineth's son. It's remarkable in the effects that it can have on the brain with regard to seizures. Absolutely extraordinary.
Okay, Guineith, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. I'll at the moment, I'll bear that in mind. Okay. At the moment, we've got him. We're still waiting for the magnesium lotion. They've had to order it in, and the zinc magnesium tablets that Dr. Shealy was recommending.
Yes.
But I will also bear in mind about the hemp oil, because I have heard that has been really something quite effective for preventing seizures in people. And it really is, hemp is an amazing plant.
Yes.
It really is.
When I originally heard...
in fact, I don't think I know that it has been deliberately demonized since the 1950s by big pharmacy companies and big oil companies, because it is such a marvelous plant. The fibers, there would not be a synthetic cloth industry if everybody was able to obtain hemp cloth at a reasonable price. It's the easiest plant in the whole world to grow. Prior to the 1950s, it was actually considered to be a very fortunate plant to have growing in your garden. And, going back into the 19th and 18th and earlier centuries, there was a tradition that the young woman used to have where they would, they would go into a graveyard with a handful of hemp seed, and they would throw the hemp seed up into the air and let it fall on the ground, basically. And about the time that the hemp crop began to grow in the graveyard, they would walk to see the hemp crop, and the man that they met would be the man that they would marry. And that was a folk tradition that the English had, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, probably going back all the way to pre-Christian Britain, more than likely. Because remember, the graveyards in Britain are also the churchyards. It's the same thing. So, but there's no way that you would ever have that today, because hemp has been so demonized. But the attitude that I have is a very much indigenous attitude to plants. That is, every plant has a useful purpose. Some plants have many useful purposes, and it's about looking at everything in balance. Okay? So if somebody grows a grapevine in their backyard and harvests the grapes and makes wine and gets drunk, is that the grapevine's fault?
Mm-hmm.
No. That's the stupid idiot who went out and made wine and got drunk. It's his own fault. And it's the same thing with guns. Guns have been demonized as well. It's not the gun's fault that some loony decides to go down to a shopping centre or into a garlic festival or whatever and goes off his rocker. That's not the firearm's fault. It's the nut behind the trigger that's the problem.
Vincent?
Yes.
But before we lose, it's the break and the end of the hour. I want you to have my home phone number and my voicemail number. Can you send me back over to the...
Okay, just stay on the line. I'm going to put you on hold. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. So I've tried 2 of the telephone listen line numbers, and sure enough, they don't work. So I don't know what's going on at this moment, but when I do find out, I will let you know. So I'll play some calls during the breaks and after the broadcast if I'm not successful in figuring out what's going on. But it doesn't look good for the 2 numbers that I dialed. So, and that's one of the things about preparedness. We know things are going to go wrong. So we bump along, everything's fine, and then something happens. And then things don't work or things break. It's like that on the farm every day. Things break every day. So we're used to it. We just, we know some of the things that are going to break. We just don't know when they're going to break. Other things, we don't know that they're going to break, but they do break. And then there are all kinds of things that break. And who would ever think that the telephone listen line would go down and not be available for a couple of weeks? Who would think that? Well, or who would think that the company would go out of business? I don't know if they are or are not, but it's not working. So I've tried a couple. I've tried the one at TalkStream Live, which is 716-748-0109. And my call cannot be completed with that one. And the other one is the one that we've been giving out for years, which is 605-477-3249. That one doesn't work. So I'm going to try a few others that I have, and we'll see what's going on, and I'll let you know. Guineith Isaacs, back to you.
Yeah, okay. Getting back to this topic, this is how surgeons have been trained forever. So if you look at a surgeon out there, he has to do an operation on 100 bodies, dead bodies, cadavers, before he will be allowed to do that same operation on a living person. So that means that every doctor, every surgeon that you see out there has 100 cadavers in his background, 100 dead bodies in his background, which means that the dead body market is very much alive and well, Vincent. It's just not something that people consider in their everyday lives. And, there's something else that I would like to just mention quickly just before we go on. This surgery, this doctor's room that I saw in this dream, I was able to verify where it was. I went onto some archival historical maps of Liverpool, and I found the block of land that this house was built on, because it was a very unusually shaped house. It was wedge-shaped. And you see these wedge-shaped buildings from time to time in England. But they're not that common, but they do exist. And, something, I was able to find this wedge-shaped block of land, and it was the only wedge-shaped block of land in the city. And it was near the Mersey River, probably only about 100 meters, about 100 yards or 50 yards or whatever from the Mersey River. And it made sense, because what I was seeing in my past life work was that my father died of cholera when I was 17, okay? And that's the reason why I chose to go to sea. And, there's so many other things in this past life as well. But the important thing is, I was able to find this block of land, and I went on Google Earth, and I actually was able to or Google Street Map, Street View, and I was able to locate where the block of land is in our modern world. And there is a road that basically leads directly up to where my front door would have been in that life. And that whole road used to be called Mersey Road, because it ran next to the Mersey River, okay? But these days, at some time in the last 300 years, somebody in the Liverpool Municipal Corporation decided that they were going to change the name of this road, Vincent. And, they changed the name of the road to Shalona Road. And you might think, well, what's so important about that? Shalona Ogle was the man who killed Bartholomew Roberts by firing a round of grape shot at his throat. We don't know if it was Shalona Ogle personally, or if it was one of his men. Probably it was one of his men, but he was the man in charge on that day And that was my lover in that life, who, when we reincarnated, he reincarnated as my husband. But I'm convinced, because the road stops being Shalona Road directly where my front door would have been in that life. How's that? And it goes, it's Shalona Road traveling, let me think, west into the middle of Liverpool for about a mile, maybe 2 miles, I don't know, maybe half a mile, I don't know. But for a certain distance, it's Shalona Road or Shalona Street. And anyone can verify this. They can go on to, they can just go and type in Shalona Street or Shalona Road, Liverpool, England, and they can see it. And it's at the far end. There's a block of, what you would call in America HUD apartments. They call them council flats in England. But that's probably not where the council flats are. Probably where the Rhode Island is, just where that road ends. And it's amazing that I was actually able to see that, and I saw this dream and where that land was. But getting back to it, the jars of body parts are still there. Not in that building. That building's been demolished. But if you go into any teaching hospital, if you go into any university with a cadaver license, they have in the basement or, in the anatomy department, they have shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of human body parts in jars. And it's a big business. And everybody who thinks that they're being righteous and virtuous by donating their body to science when they die, or saying that, I'm going to tick yes on that organ donor card on my driver's license, or however things run in your country, you have to be aware of the system that is there, because it ain't pretty. It is not pretty at all. And I need to advise people that if anyone out there who's listening to this broadcast is squeamish, you need to tune to another station, because what we're going to describe is pretty gory. Should I go on and describe what I emailed to you earlier, Vincent, or do you think it would be too much?
No, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I'll tell you why. There are plenty of programs surrounding USA Prepares that are about political discussions, things that you can learn about. Oh, he sighed when he said such and such, or she said such and such, or it's our opinion that they meant such and such. You can listen to plenty of that. And when you do, and I was talking to Sonny Skidmore about this last night. She's the owner of a radio station. She's 90 years old, and we were talking about this. And she said that we were the only program on her radio station that told people how to do things. And all the other programs are about sports or are about politics. And when you're all done listening to sports and politics, there's absolutely nothing that you can take away from that and use in your daily life. There's nothing. So we're going to continue. We're going to raise the bar even higher. And yes, Guineith, please do. Oh, by the way, Guineith, I have been advised that we have too much of Norm Shealy, too much of Rick Miller, too much of Rich Sheban, and too much of Guineith Isaacs. Really?
Oh, that's nice.
Well, that was, that happened a couple of years ago.
Let's give these people something to squirm about.
That's right.
That's
right. And from my perspective, Norm and Guineith and Rick and Rich, they're not going anywhere unless they want to, okay? From my perspective, they're welcome here. So, Guineith, please continue.
Okay. Now, this this is for everybody out there who thinks that they're being righteous and virtuous by ticking the organ donor card, however it operates in your country. Usually it's through the driver's license system, where if you get in a car smash or whatever, then, they're going to get your driver's license. They're going to say, oh, organ donor, all righty. I'll tell you what's going to happen to you if you're in a crash and you're unconscious. Maybe you've gotten whacked in the head, or maybe you were walking along and some bandit came along with a firearm and held it up to your temple and pulled the trigger. Actually, you'd be dead then, so then you wouldn't have this problem. But let's say the injury wasn't quite so fatal. Okay. Let's say that you survived, but you were in a very, very bad way, that you were unconscious, but you had ticked that organ donor card and you said, yes, I want to be an organ donor. I'll tell you what's going to happen when you get to the hospital. You're going to be unconscious, or you're going to be barely conscious and not able to really object. But you have given your consent to this, and that gives them permission. And that's really, really important. Do not consent to anything they do. It's all harmful. Your family is going to get told, oh, well, Joe Bloggs, your dear dad Joe, he's brain dead. And, we can't save him. He's in a coma. He's not going to wake up. So we want your permission. He's ticked his organ donor card, and we want your permission to go ahead and proceed with the process of organ donation. And it will probably be done in a nice smelling room, painted in pastel colours with nice flowers.
Hold that thought. Hold that. Just a quick update. I don't think I'm going to have information for you today about telephone listen lines, because all the ones I've tried don't work, and I'm having trouble finding information. So let me do some research after the broadcast, and I'll let you know what I have found out. So for now, you can go to gcnlive.com, and USA Prepares is listed. You can listen there. Or you can go to YouTube, the Ron Gibson channel, and we're there. Or you can go to republicbroadcasting.org, and you can listen there, or you can listen to their archives, as well as the GCN archives. So, or you can just do a search on USA Prepares and see what you find. So those are the thoughts. So, Guineith, we're talking about organ donors alive when their organs are harvested. Yeah,
they are. They're alive. So if you tick that organ donor card, you are going to be, the technical term is eviscerated. That means gutted out while you are alive without anesthetic. They can't give you anesthetic because anesthetics are a drug, and they make the organs useless for transplant purposes, because any drug that they give you is going to go into the organs that they're going to have to transplant, and there might be somebody who has an allergic reaction to an anesthetic, so they, or that anesthetic or that substance that has been put into your system, okay? So they can't have any drugs or anything like that in any of the organs that they are transplanting. It makes them useless for the transplant market purposes. And so you will be gutted out while you are still alive. If you might not be conscious, okay, but you are getting the stories beginning to filter out from doctors who do this type of work, and they are saying that they have the unconscious person flailing around and this sort of thing, and they can track stress, they can track pain through things like breath rate, heart rate, particular hormone levels like adrenaline, adrenochrome, and this sort of thing. And they're going to gut you out alive if you tick that card that says, yes, I want to be an organ donor. And your family will be completely oblivious of everything that's going on. They'll be in a nice, scented chapel with a statue of Jesus and Mary standing there. You know, I love Jesus. I love Mother Mary as well. I don't pray to Mary, but I think that Mother Mary is a lovely lady. I've got nothing against Jesus and Mother Mary, but it's the hypocrisy, Vincent, where they've got the family who are grieving in a pastel, sweetly scented little chapel. Well, meanwhile, their relative is being gutted out alive. And you might say, well, why isn't this person screaming? That's very easy to fix. The voice box is a very easy instrument to disable medically. I can tell you that.
That's done.
I'm just saying.
That's done on. That's done in puppy mills where they raise puppies to be lab experiments, and they will cut the vocal cords so you won't hear these dogs scream and bark, and they're absolutely silent. And the other thing that they do, Guineith, is they put tape. They tape the eyes shut so that the medical team doesn't see the excruciating pain in the eyes of the person who is just being murdered.
Yeah, they're going to murder you. You've hit the nail on the head, Vincent. They're not going to try and save your life. You're not going to be there in an ICU for weeks or months in a coma. They're going to gut you out while you are still alive. Do not sign that organ donor card. Never, ever give permission for your body parts to be used in the transplant market.
And sold. We'll be right back. Guineith is with us live in Australia. George, New Hampshire, welcome. You're on with Guineith.
Hi, Vincent. Hi, Guineith. I wasn't going to weigh in today, but just this subject happened to just hit a chord because I know something about it in the sense that I know, for example, in England, they apply anesthesia to the person before they harvest the organs, whereas here they don't apply anesthetics when they harvest the organs. And the other thing is, too, is that I worked in a job where part of my responsibility was to monitor a certain segment of the nursing home people. And I heard of a case when I was there that for about 10 years a man had been in a coma. He had been in an iron lung, and he came to after 10 years. And obviously he had a lot of questions, and I'll spare you the details on that, but I'll just say that even if you opt out, where you don't fill in, do you want to become an organ donor, it doesn't really go anywhere. In other words, it kind of is neutral. And there's no such condition as brain dead. That's not.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. That you're right, George. You're right.
No,
if your brain is really dead, then the rest of you is dead too. That's really, really not true. It's a con. It's a lie.
It's a con, and they say like a heart, for example, is worth as much as $1 million to a hospital in a heart transplant. And are either of you familiar with the writings of a David Pallades? He has Missing 411. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Well, it's something that I think you'll find very interesting and fascinating.
Please share that, George. Please share
that. All right. There's a situation going on in our national parks where thousands of hikers have disappeared. And when I say disappeared, I mean these are people who oftentimes are very experienced. Many of them are doctors. Many of them are of German descent. Many of them are men and women who are at the peak of their physical condition, where they're avid hikers, avid athletes, and they disappear under circumstances that when the search and rescue moves in, what tends to be a pattern that Mr. Pallades, who was a former police detective and has a very wide-ranging background, he delved into it and did a lot of research. He has a team, and he's written a number of books. And what it concerns is that when these people go missing, sometimes right under the noses of their companions, they were either last in line, first in line, or they just turned around the trail, or they were just heading back a very short distance just to receive something, never to be seen again. They said when they disappeared and report, invariably a weather pattern that will settle in suddenly, and it will last for days, if not a week, and it will really put a damper in the search operations. They said if they call in tracking dogs, more often than not, the tracking dogs in these cases don't want to track. They might go in a circle and then just lay down, as if they've literally quite disappeared in thin air. And what I'm saying is that they're also finding in Australia this is happening, and in England, in Manchester, England, they're finding a lot of these people who disappear out of clubs. A lot of college-age men are disappearing out of clubs, and then a week later they'll be found face down in water that might come up not even to your knees. And when they do the autopsies, they find that these people weren't in the water for a week. So wherever they're being taken, more often than not, the people don't come back. They said that the National Park Service is mum on it. They don't even keep a database on missing persons within the park. And this Mr. Pallades, P-A-L-I-D-E-S, just under Missing 411, you'll find that, not to go on and on, I'll just say that he was approached by concerned park rangers and foresters who came to him, sat down and said that they were familiar that he was a writer and they knew about his law enforcement background and his contacts. They asked him to look into it because it was really bothering a lot of the people when they'd be involved in these searches, that children would disappear, and like I said, that same pattern emerged in these cases. And he's talking about, like I say, millions of people go into those places, but I'm beginning to wonder if there may not be. He won't come to a conclusion because he doesn't have the answer yet, so he'll keep his integrity and the validity of his research, but he presents the facts and he lets you draw to your own conclusions.
I just looked up Missing 411, and it's a video. And it's darn expensive. It looks like $40 to $60 for...
well, no, you know what that is, Vincent? There are people scalping it who will buy it, but he sells them on a website between $15 and $25, depending on what book it is. But they said there are people who are buying books like on Amazon, or they're buying books, and they're scalping them, putting them up on places like Amazon. I'm not blaming Amazon for this, but individuals, they'll mark it up to $75 and $100, and he makes it emphatically. He's a guest on many, many programs. He'd be a very interesting guest for you, Vincent, too. And you'll find he's a very down-to-earth gentleman. What?
Do you? Yes. Do you have his contact information?
I can try to get it. But Guineith, I think you'll find it fascinating because it's in Australia as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm aware of cases.
I'll try to get it.
Missing person cases that fit that profile. There was actually a fellow, and he was called the backpacker murderer, or the backpacker killer. He's never going to get out of prison. His name is called Ivan Milat, and he went and killed a bunch of backpackers up in Belanglo State Forest, which is about 2 hours drive from here, on the Victoria-New South Wales border. And, he made about a dozen people disappear, and then 1 or 2 people escaped from him, and they went to the police, and the police got him. But there's another famous missing persons case that fits that profile, and that's the murder, or presumed murder, of Elizabeth Membry. That's Membery. And she was working at a hotel, at a tavern in Bayswater in Melbourne, and she left work and went to walk home and was never seen again. And it was something like a 1 kilometre, half a mile walk home. And she was, I was living in Bayswater at the time, and I can tell you for sure, there were some really, really evil, criminal, creepy type people hanging around Bayswater in the middle of the night at that time, and I suspect that's probably what happened to Elizabeth Membry. So maybe that doesn't quite fit the profile of them just, dropping back from the walk and just not being seen again. There are a lot of missing persons cases.
Guineith, can I ask you this question? I'm told there's an area, and Vincent, you'll find this interesting too, that there's certain areas that the Native Americans over the centuries and the Aborigines in Australia would avoid like the plague. And I believe in Australia there's a place called Black Mountain. Now I'm going from memory. I might be off, Guineith, but are you familiar with that or something similar to that? That they said a lot of people have disappeared around that area, and that there's a lot of activity going on, that, in other words, that has been there since maybe the dawn of time, that the Aboriginal people just completely avoid it.
Actually, something. I actually heard a story about something similar to that in this local area. And my son and I actually laughed at it at the time, but maybe it's not something. Actually, I know that this particular mountain to this day, it's actually in this municipality, and to this day, white people, witches, devil worshippers go to this place, and they do ceremonies there on a particular mountain in this municipality. Okay, in this general area, there is a mountain. There's lots of mountains in this area, but this particular mountain, the devil worshippers go there to this day, and they do ceremonies there. And but you look at the Aboriginal history of this mountain, and it's always been a place that had real bad juju, as the voodoo people would say. It's a very unlucky place, and there's a town at the foot of this mountain, and that town, it's got a high crime rate. It's only got about 100 people living in this town, but the crime rate on this place is absolutely phenomenal. It's notorious for violent crime in the local area, but there's only about 100 people live in this little hamlet. And I was looking in a historic, document of a police report going back 150 years, talking about this little hamlet 150 years ago, and it said, and this police report said, we need an extra constable here. The crime rate in this place is phenomenal. It's just a really, really violent place, and this town happens to be at the foot of the mountain where the devil ceremonies happen, where Satanists meet to this day and go and have satanic ceremonies up on the mountainside. How's that? That sort of thing happens. And you look at the Aboriginal history of that same mountain, and they say that, a 10-mile-long dragon lives in this place. That's what they say. They say, and it wraps itself around the mountain. And my son and I actually laughed at it when we heard the story, because we thought that's the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. But since you bring it up, maybe they were seeing something on a spiritual level, because actually there really is something very evil in that place. And yeah, it's just a really, really, really unfortunate place. And anyone who, I know people who live there who moved there thinking that they were moving into a nice, peaceful, quiet little country town, and little did they know of what was going to go on there. It's always been like that. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, George?
Yes, that, like I say, they say in some of these areas on the old maps, they might call it Devil's Den or some other thing. That, in other words, it was a place that was associated with evil, or that it had that name for a reason, and it wasn't always clear why or the wherefores. But I know this man who did the research, Mr. Pallades, said that he seems to come up with clusters like in the Yosemite. I don't know if you've heard of anything like this yourself, Vincent.
Sure. George, did you want to hold through the break?
If you don't mind, I don't mean to interfere with you.
Sure. Yeah. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia, and George is with us in New Hampshire. George, I want to thank you for connecting USA Prepares and Phil Hudock, and he'll be on again this Friday, hour number 1. So, in case unless you want to follow Phil Hudock's information, hour number 1 on Friday. And I really appreciate that, George. George, you had a couple other comments?
Well, just a couple of quick comments would be, one is, I told you a long time ago that David Rockefeller lived to about 104, 106 years old. And he wasn't, if you looked at him, he wasn't really what you'd call a fine specimen in terms of physical fitness or anything like that. But it came in my research that he had as many as 6 heart transplants. Most people have to be on a waiting list for quite a time and be fortunate enough that they live so long as to, be taken on the list, taking off the list for an operation of that sort. Henry Kissinger has had as many as 4. And yet, if you notice, they're exceptionally long-lived, over 100 or towards 100. And I noticed that in these disappearances, a lot of very athletic people who've been on those trails, very experienced people, you would say it was almost like if you could go into a catalog and just put in an order and then basically sit back and wait until somebody delivers an exceptional example. And then also the doctors and physicists that have disappeared, that when they were running or hiking just disappeared, it would be ideal for some place like the North Koreans, who I know kidnap people, like in Japan and places like that. They'll kidnap people, bring them back to North Korea for whatever particular demand there is, for whatever program or their expertise. I can't help thinking that, it's happening here, it's happening to us, and technologies are being used. And the last thing I'll just say is, Mr. Pallades, oh, by the way, I want to thank you for having Phil Hudock on, for the service. You'd be interested in this. I wish you lived in the United States, Guineith, because this would be right up your alley and would be, I think, a passport to true freedom for you from a lot of the encroachments and other things that have been going on, which I say my prayers for you. And I know the audience does, and Vincent, we all pray for you over there, because I know you've had to basically take the hit for standing up for your convictions. But I'll just say, with that peace treaty 2020, Phil Hudock, he went through the whole process, as you know, Vincent. And I want to thank you for because this could be a way for us to get out from under citizenship and into what the constitutional founders truly wanted for us. And what God is that we're not citizens of a corporate United States. We're children of God that have God-given rights. And that's the fundamental. There's that kleptocracy and this legal corporation that's grown up amongst us, and it's totally anathema. It's totally anti freedom, even though it poses with certain names on its things. And that's all I'll say. It was a pleasure talking to both of you. God bless. Bye-bye.
George, thank you so much. George is a really brilliant guy. I love it when he calls, and he's a dear friend. Guineith, I think we have exposed the deception of the organ donation program, that you are alive when this happens. And literally, if you do some research and just type organ donor, you'll come up with some images that are pretty horrific. And it's legalized murder. And your eyes will be taped shut. That's so you can't see what's going on while you're being eviscerated. And, Guineith, it seems like this is just one step removed from drawing and quartering, isn't it?
Well, yeah. That's exactly what it is. Except you're not a treasonous, evil person that this deserves to happen to. You're Joe Blow down the road. You're Joe
So
Blow.
when your family member is in the hospital and the doctor comes over and says, look, there's no hope, we've got brain dead body there, we can make some good use of it, how would you like, to be an organ donor? Families, you really need to pay attention. And I'd be pretty furious if my family said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, cut him up and sell his parts while he's alive. Make sure you tape his eyes shut. Let me tell you what. I've been through a procedure that is not quite like that, but I've been strapped down on an operating table, my legs strapped down, my chest strapped down, my torso strapped down, my head strapped down. A thing was stuck in my mouth. It's like trying to eat a silver dollar size, a toilet tissue tube. That's what it's like trying to eat one of those, but plastic. And you can't move. The only thing you can do is wet your pants, blink, and sweat. Thanks so much for being with us, Guineith.